Okay. I need the back row to be quiet. So one last thing about, we spent like 3 weeks in Genesis 38 talking about Judah and Tamar and all the things that went around with it. I just wanted to punctuate it just real quick, is that, that story was not about bad behavior. It wasn't about people not taking responsibility for their duties, although that was the story that it was built around. But what it was showing that God protects the messianic line. When Judah's son could not give a child to Tamar, and when Judah's other son, Onan, wouldn't give a child to Tamar, and when Judah didn't come through with the third son, whatever his name was, we'll use the name Ralph just as a place setting, there would have been no line for Messiah because it had to come from the tribe of Judah, and that would have been the end. So God used the actions of those people, Tamar at the gate in the marketplace, etc., Judah for his unfaithfulness, whatever, to provide for that line, the continuation of that line with Perez that we read about in the genealogies, in Matthew. So that's what that's about. And that's what so much of the Bible or the actions of the Jews, the Israelites, is all about, protecting that line, that messianic line. So when we get into, who knows, just real quick, like on 2 sentences, what Hanukkah is about?
Lights.
Okay, lights. We have lights here. Okay.
But they like the candle.
Okay. Anybody else got one? Anybody else want to take a shot? Okay. Not even close. And that's what we'll get into today. This is what people do during the celebration. Like that. And I'm talking about Jews. I mean, most Jews could not tell you other than the temple was defiled. The Jews won the battle, and they found a flask of oil that was only going to last 1 day, and God made it last 8 days. And so, hallelujah, we have Hanukkah. And but I'll tell you something. You ask people today the Christmas story, and you're not going to get much better. Other than Jesus was born in a manger, there was something that, Mary and Joseph, the reservations got lost at the Hyatt. And so they had to have the baby Jesus out in a barn. We talked about that last week. And angels were there. And then 3 wise men came and they gave gifts. And so therefore we have a Christmas tree with lights, Santa Claus, and eggnog. And so it's not much difference. But as we know, there's a lot more to the story. Okay, so that's where we are as far as the that goes. And then, like I say, next week we'll get into how people actually observe Hanukkah today. We'll get into, is it Hanukkah with a Hanukkah, or is it Hanukkah with a Chunnak? And you get, there's like 20 different spellings and pronunciations. I say the pronunciations, but people don't know. And it's not like it was something that happened right after the temple was rededicated, and then didn't happen for 1,000,000 years. Until Jesus came, they were kind of doing this festival of lights, dedication of the festival of dedication. And then when the Jews were scattered, they didn't do it for years, and it resurfaced in the 18th, 19th century, where it became a big thing again, just like Christmas. Christmas was never a big thing. I'm I'm talking about the celebration of Christmas until end of the 18th century, going into the 19th century, and then it became a big. That's where Santa Claus came in. I mean, Santa Claus wasn't there, right after the apostles were gone, like that. But the thing I like about Hanukkah is it's not a festival, a holiday that is commanded by God to observe. It's not even biblical, it comes in that time, in that 400 period after the book of Malachi and the book of Matthew, and there's a 400-year gap, with no prophetic utterances from anybody, no prophets in the land until John the Baptist showed up today, that Pastor was talking about this morning. And, it wasn't, but in that time, we have what we'll talk about today. And hang on just a second, Nicholas. We'll have what we're talking about today with, because Jews are still living their life. They still got their temple going, and stuff like that. And so what happened, and then that's what gets celebrated. But I like it, because, Christianity, we've talked about this before. We have no holidays that we're commanded to keep. There are none. I can't. We do it. We commemorate days. Pardon?
Quigley's Bonfire Day. Quigley's Bonfire Day.
Bonfire Day?
It was a joke played on the world in New York.
Oh, okay. Nicholas.
Oh, it's like the Apocrypha, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, it comes out of the story is told. There's the Apocrypha in the book of Maccabees. There's two books of Maccabees, and we'll get into what the story is. Now, the funny thing is that the Apocrypha, which we do not consider canonical, we don't consider it God inspired like we do the 66 other books that are in the scriptures. They're writings. They tell us about the history of what happened or who was who, and some stories may be more fanciful than others. Some are, like this story here in the book of Maccabees, seems to be more historical and that. But there are Christian groups that do have the apocryphal books in the Bible. The Roman Catholics do. They keep, I think there's 7 of them. There's 7 or 13. Who knows? But anyway, that they're in their Bible between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And then you have the apocryphal writings. And even they, I don't think that they say they're exactly canonical, but they're close to canonical. So they've got them in there. The Eastern Orthodox, the Greek Orthodox, they have them in their Bible. The funny thing is that they have them scattered throughout their Bible. You'll get some of the stuff, there's 2 extra chapters in the book of Daniel that come out of Bel and the Dragon, I think. And then there's, anyway, the book of Esther has extra chapters. But it's writings that they're not bad to read. I mean, it's not like you're going to, God's going to find out you're reading the Apocrypha and you're going to go to hell for it. Ray.
How does the menorah tie in with Hanukkah?
Well, that what we'll see that where they've got the 8 days. So in order to, the basic story with the lights is, because I don't have it in today's notes, but the basic story with the lights is that they found the little bit of oil when they kicked the Syrians out who defiled it, and they had to cleanse the temple and rededicate it. But you have to have candles in the temple. And they had 1 day's worth of oil, and the oil lasted 8 days. Now, it doesn't say anything in there about lighting 8 candles, but we celebrate and we observe things and we do things with imagery or physically so that people will understand what's happening. So for the 8 days of Hanukkah, it's the 8 days of the oil lasting, and on each day you light a candle, and therefore you have the menorah that has the 8 candles. Then the one in the middle is the one that is the 1 day of oil that lights all the others.
I looked up because I wanted to greet you this morning when you came in, because I knew that Hanukkah was coming up. And I looked up and it had like 100 greetings for greeting somebody that's Jewish. And it said, and it had to do with the lights. That's why my answer was light. And it said joy and light and, happiness and light. So everything's tied to light, which ties into the story that you.
Yeah, well, see, you always want to tie a biblical story into Jesus. You got to find Jesus there somewhere. You can't tell, in a Christian setting, you can't tell the story of Hanukkah without pointing out Jesus, that Jesus is that central theme. So Jesus is the light of the world. See, all these things, all this stuff is like, not God's the puppet master, but God's moving all these things in this direction so that when Jesus comes, the Jews, God's chosen people are supposed to say, aha. And they didn't. They just missed it like that. And but we'll get into that. But anyway, turn in your Bibles. I should have said this 15 minutes. Turn in your Bibles to John chapter 10. How's that for a place to find Hanukkah? Diane, I'm glad you got those dolls there. I'm going to count them in attendance today, okay? Anyway, let me know when you're in John chapter 10.
John chapter 10.
John chapter 10. And also, while you're still there, I guess you can put your finger in John chapter 7, but John chapter 10.
Okay.
So it begins in John chapter 10 in verse 22. It says, at the time the festival of dedication took place in Jerusalem, it was winter, and Jesus was walking in the temple in the colonnade of Solomon. Okay, and this feast of dedication is Hanukkah. Okay, and it places when it was. It says it's in winter. Okay, so and hey, we are in winter as of yesterday. So, okay, so Jesus shows up for these holidays, and he's just kind of walking around. We don't think he's causing trouble, but he is. We'll see. Now listen, that was in the English Standard Version. In the Orthodox Jewish Bible, it says, then the Chag, C-H-A-G, which means festival of Hanukkah, spelled with the C-H, took place in Jerusalem, which is Jerusalem, in the winter. And Rebbe Melech HaMoshiach, that's Jesus, the Messiah, was walking around in the Beis Hamidash, probably the courtyard, in the area called Ulam Shlomo, which is Solomon's colonnade. Shlomo is Jewish for Solomon. So anyway, so they've got, sounds a little different when they do it. But anyway, so there he is, walking around. It's on the Feast of Dedication. So the Jews gathered, this is in verse 24. This will be 24 to 30. So the Jews gathered around him and said to him, how long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly. Jesus answered them, I told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name bear witness about me, but you do not believe because you are not among my sheep. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they will never perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father who has given them to me is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of the Father's hand. I and the Father are one. Pretty strong statement. But see, the question that we're going to try to get to today is, why did the Jews ask him these questions on Hanukkah? You know, is there something special about Hanukkah that makes them ask these types of questions? Okay. Now, obviously, they didn't like his answer. And how do we know they didn't like his answer? In verse 31, it says, the Jews picked up stones again to stone him. Every time Jesus talks to them, they pick up stones, stones to stone him. Now, this is going to go in a couple of weeks. When we get into January, I don't know if it'll be the first week or the second week, we're going to start a class on the crucifixion, okay? And it'll probably run through the resurrection like that. Because there's a lot there. Because see, this is a big question, is why were they always mad at Jesus? That they always wanted to kill him, you know? And then we see throughout, especially throughout the New Testament or throughout the Gospels, all these different groups of people wanted to kill Jesus. And it's like, what, Ray?
Well, he's not the image that they foresaw, and that their savior would come and annihilate the Romans and anybody that was their enemy.
Right, and that's what they missed. You know, that's the old Jewish thing, is they were expecting a Messiah who would be a conqueror. You know, the conqueror that we saw on Master's Men in Revelation 19, who shows up on a white horse with a sword coming out of his mouth, blood all over his clothes. You know, that's who they expected. But what they missed was they missed the part that says Jesus must come in humility first. If you read Isaiah 53, which we'll get into, whether it's this week or next week, you read Isaiah 53, where it talks about the suffering servant, and it just goes through all that torturous stuff that he has to go through. They missed that, you know? So, Joe.
Yeah, it seems that they also missed the part about the battle is not with flesh and blood, but with the spiritual world.
Right.
In the spiritual world.
Yeah,
They're
well,
looking for a physical battle when it's a spiritual.
well, but see, that's a New Testament take on it, because I think in the Old Testament, I think it's pretty clear that somebody's going to come and beat the snot out of the bad guys. You know, pardon? Yeah, there he's a bully. No, you know, like that. But remember, and you got to always keep this in mind when we're reading stuff and we're comparing Old Testament to New Testament, is just what I think, or what I say, is that the Old Testament is the Bible and the New Testament is the commentary on the Bible. So when they think that they're reading their Bible and they think that it's some bully that's going to come and, you know, take out the bad guys, whoever the bad guys are at the time, the New Testament says it's not against flesh and blood. It's about the spirits in the sky and all those battles. And then you start looking back, and that's where in the Old Testament and Daniel and some of the other places, you see that with Michael fighting the bad guys in the spirit world. And that's when they, I guess maybe that is, and I did miss, you know, that part. Were you going to say something, Nicholas, or did we already do it? Okay. Right, see, if I wait long enough, you forget. So it said the Jews picked up stones again to stone him. Jesus answered them, I have shown you many good works from the Father. For which of them are you going to stone me? And the Jews answered him, said, it is not for a good work that we are going to stone you, but for blasphemy. And this is a key verse. I mean, this is a key verse of the Gospels of who Jesus is, because the bad guys always recognize who Jesus is, and the good guys, the apostles, are just all flummoxed and confused. He says, for you being a man, make yourself to be God. To the Jews, they understood completely what he was saying. You know, and the apostles, they just couldn't get it. So this, I've got, so the question is, we have to ask ourselves is why it was on Hanukkah, the particular holiday that prompted the Jewish leaders to ask him so pointedly if he was the promised Messiah. So we know at that time they're looking for a promised Messiah. It's just a matter of who they're looking for. And so, you got to kind of figure out the context. So Jesus is there on Hanukkah. We saw him there in John chapter 7. While I'm talking, turn to John chapter 7. It's a couple of pages back from John chapter 10. Anyway, but we saw him there at the Feast of Pentecost. Remember that was the story where his is that his brothers or his disciples, whoever it was, said to him, "Come on, it's time for the feast of not tabernacle, the feast of Pentecost, and come on down."
Make yourself known.
And then they added that part, and make yourself known. And Jesus said, "No, nobody tells me what to do." He said, "No, I'm not going to go." And then they went, and then later he's down, he's fiddling around with some stuff, and then he decides he's going to go, which I think he knew he was going to go all along. He just didn't want to go with them. Okay, so then when we get to we're looking in chapter 7, then he is there with them. And then in the same chapter, if you remember the holidays we studied, we did Pentecost, and then we did, wait a minute. Or was it Rosh Hashanah? Maybe it was Rosh, I don't remember now. But anyway, because we get to the Feast of Tabernacles, the Feast of Booths, Sukkoth, okay, which is one of the holidays that we covered. Jesus is still there because that comes right after. They go right after each other. Okay, so he's still there. And now we've got what seems to be, when did we do? So, maybe a month and a half. And now he's still in the temple or in Jerusalem at Hanukkah. So maybe he's there the whole time. Maybe he's annoying those people the whole time. So in John 7:37-39, this is on Sukkot, the tabernacles. He says, on the last day of the feast, the great day, Jesus stood up and cried out, "If anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water." Now this is, and this he said about the Spirit, whom those who believed in him were to receive. For as yet the Spirit had not been given, because Jesus had not yet been glorified. So that's a big deal when he's talking about, "I will give you, the water," like that. When they heard these words, and this is in verse 40 of chapter 7, when they heard these words, some of the people said, "This really is the prophet." Others said, "This is the Christ." But some said, "This is the Christ. Is this the Christ to come from Galilee? Has not the scripture said that the Christ comes from the offspring of David and comes from Bethlehem, the village where David was?" So there was a division among the people over him. Some of them wanted to arrest him, but no one laid hands on him. So, they're all confused over who he is because they know he speaks with authority. They just can't figure out why, So some are thinking it's for good. Some are thinking it's for bad.
But it sounds confusing.
Huh?
Like,
Yeah.
if you put yourself in that time.
Oh,
it's probably very-
right. No, we like to think, we'd be right there signing the papers to follow Jesus. We'll get the "What Would Jesus Do" bracelets, and no, we would be just as confused
Yeah.
as them. We would say at the birth of Jesus, if I lived back then, I would have taken them into my house. I would have gone to Costco, bought them one of those giant boxes of diapers. No, we would have done that. We would have done the same.
Are we said called Child Protective Services?
Yeah. Right. No, that's a good point. He said I'd call, we'd probably call Child Protective Services and, have Jesus taken away from them, that goes back to what we finished off last week when we were talking about Mary, how she gets all presented, as looking nice, fresh washed hair, when really she's probably dirty and grubby. And then Pastor told me that watching, what was the movie that you watched last?
The best Christmas.
Yeah, the best Christmas pageant ever, where they got all the hooligans from the neighborhood who nobody likes, but somebody invites them to be in the pageant. And then Pastor said, and the girl that was Mary, is just all ratty and and stuff like that. And that's probably real. And so we watch movies like that and we laugh about it, but that's where the truth comes from, is where you don't expect. When you leave it up to the professional theologians, they screw it all up. They really do. I mean, they don't make it where it's real people. Yeah. So it says in verses 45, it says, the officers then came to and we'll get to the Hanukkah story here. So the officers then came to the chief priests and Pharisees, who said to them, why did you not bring him? The officers answered, no one ever spoke like this man. What are we supposed to do? He said, the Pharisees answered them, have you also been deceived? Have any of the authorities or the Pharisees believed in him? But the crowd that does not know the law is accursed. Nicodemus, who had gone to him before, and who was one of them, said to them, does our law judge a man without first giving him a hearing and learning what he does? They replied, are you from Galilee too? Search and see that no prophet arises out of Galilee. So even though all the people seem to be testifying there's something special about this guy, the church leaders aren't buying it. Even if it's true, they're not buying it. That's what makes Nicodemus special. When we were back in chapter 3, is one, he went to inquire about, Jesus. And we find out towards the end that him and Joseph of Arimathea, who was also a Jewish leader, had become followers, of Jesus. So, anyway, look, here's my simplified version of what happens on Hanukkah. Okay. Who knows their history? Who knows Alexander the Great? Not Alexander the Average, or Alexander who was trying, Alexander the Great was actually great. He conquered the known world in 10 years. I mean, you gotta remember, he didn't have any, jets or drones or rockets and missiles and stuff like that. I mean, he conquered the known world in 10 years. The only flaw he had was he died when he was 33 years old, So now what becomes of his kingdom? So it got divided up between his 4 generals, which was prophesied in the book of Daniel, if you read between the lines a little bit, when it talks about the great statue and then you end up with the, anyway, you'd have to be in Daniel, which we did maybe like 3 years ago.
What did that look like, having to conquer the world? Like what bloodshed was there in 10 years?
What bloodshed?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? It could be that there was only bloodshed in the beginning, because once you hear that Alexander is coming to Lake Havasu with his army, although we may have them outgunned here in Havasu, but most cities don't. But no. But yeah, once you hear he's coming here, it's like, welcome, King. Yeah, what are you gonna do? So. But again, it's a good question, because what you want to do is you want to bring it to real life, So anyway, so it was broken up into 4 kingdoms, and amongst those 4 were the Ptolemaic Empire. It's PTOM, the Ptolemy, like that empire, which was Egypt. They had Egypt, and then there was the Seleucid Empire, which was in the north, going up through Syria and lands like that. Now, Israel was kind of like a land bridge between Egypt and, Syria and those areas, that were north. And
That's a question.
yeah,
So you.
give me a microphone so that Chris can.
Satisfied with like, because I'm just asking, because I'm sitting there thinking like, even outside of like Christian scholarship,
Huh?
even like within Jewish scholarship, like they have to be able to look at all those events occurring. Like the grand scheme, like we can look back in history and look at like all the sweeping empires moving, and this little nation of
Right.
Jews just kind of hovering and moving around. Like, how does the rest of the world view that?
They just look at a world, they wouldn't put together any religious context to it.
Okay.
Because
Just
Israel,
nations of
because
people.
Israel outside of maybe some of the surrounding area is just another nation. And if you're Rome or if you're Assyria or whoever you might be, okay, they've got their own gods. These people have their gods. Egypt has their gods. Mesopotamia has their gods, and Israel has our gods. They're not as good as our gods, the Grecian gods or the Roman gods, but they have their own gods. But they don't.
That's kind of like where we're at today in America. We're like a new Roman Empire with all the different cultures and influences pouring in.
Yeah, and we don't, and we do just like what the Roman Empire did. The Roman Empire did not care who your God was. You could worship any old God you want. Just make sure that you bow down to Caesar when you're supposed to bow down to Caesar. You want to have these other flaky gods, you want to have your ceremonies and things like that. And that's what we tell people. And doesn't have to just be religious. It's just cultural things. If you want to, I don't want to get into individual things, but I mean, yeah, if you want to be gay, or if you want to be transsexual, or you want to be, I don't know, help me, if you want to be a Democrat or Republican, we don't care. We just want peace. Like that. You disturb the peace, you're going to be in trouble.
So there was a shift that occurred from Rome where they went from pagan to Christian. And you would say, right?
I'm sorry. I was thinking earlier than what you're talking about. Yes, there was a change.
Like later on, they went from pagan. So we've seen in history, like, would you say like America currently, we're just pagan? We would just be like a pagan country.
You know what? I think we've got enough of Christian culture that I think it still wins the day. How long it will, who knows? I mean, maybe it'll last through my kids. My kids are all late 40s, early 50s. My grandkids go from 21 to 5. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe by the time that they're mid-adults, maybe it's gone. I don't know. But I think there's still enough today. I mean, I think if you drove around town right now, you're going to see cars in all the parking lots of all the churches, except for the Seventh-day Adventists. You won't see them there. No, but I mean, I think you'll see cars there, some few cars, some a whole bunch of cars, and
How about the Jewish temple?
well, you won't see them there today.
No, it's here.
What are you asking?
Are they having anything to celebrate on either side of Christmas?
Yeah, Hanukkah falls on Christmas Day this year. It's a rarity. And so the first day of Christmas is the first day of Hanukkah.
That would be the church.
And it's an 8-day thing like that. So when we come back next week, we'll still be in Hanukkah and we'll finish up, doing it. But it's like, here's the thing, because if you ask people why they have 8 days of Hanukkah, they'll say, I don't know, there's 8 candles. Somebody's got to be around to light them. But how many Christians know what the 12 days of Christmas are? Everybody thinks the 12 days of Christmas are the 12 days leading up to Christmas.
Correct.
And it's not. It's starting at Christmas and running the 12 days to right before Epiphany. and those are the 12, so, we're all lost. I
Well,
mean,
they're worried about partridges.
I'm sorry?
They're worried more about partridges and those sort of things.
Yeah, I know. Well, not, but we all do it. And I have nothing against secular Christmas at all, as long as you keep them separate. Like if we were to say, we'll come to church on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, and we'll celebrate the nativity of our Lord. And then we go home and we celebrate Christmas, Santa Claus, that kind of the partridge in a pear tree, and we do it that way. The only problem is we join them together, and then you end up with the picture, the little statuette thing of Santa Claus bowing before the manger. I mean,
Well, the only thing, Jingle Bell.
but yeah. I'm gonna put it in your hymnal, just slip a page of that. Anyway, so eventually there arose a Greco-Syrian king by the name of Antiochus Epiphanes IV. Now he's going to lead this, Syrian, the Seleucid empire, but he wanted to, and this is what Alexander wanted to do also, wanted to make all the world Greek in culture, language, in customs, so that everybody had the same culture. And so he wanted to, so he wanted to do that. So when he had come into power, he'd go through Israel, that land bridge, and he'd see all these people, being Jews and doing all the Jewish stuff, and he wanted to put an end to it.
So was there ever like a racial element with his?
No, they were all the same. They were all, well, you mean between Greeks and Semitic people?
No,
No.
like the way we do it now, how you kind of look at like the way like modern, Jews in modern Germany. But I'm saying, was there any like?
I
was he
don't
just
think so.
concerned about spreading-
I don't think it was a racial thing. I just think that they wanted to, because they went north of where they were too, and still wanted to do the same thing. But you got to admit, everything goes peaceful if everybody does everything the same way. In a country, say a country, let alone the world, if we get everybody doing it right. Christians want that. This is the big thing that we go through with the Christian nationalists, and that is that they think, no, America is God's country, and he wants everybody in America to do it this way. And they want to force it on people. They don't do it necessarily with guns and stuff like that, but they want to legislate in the schools and the courts and the this and that. And it's easy to get into that and say, yeah, why? What's wrong with that? Except for it's doing the same thing, just on the other end of the scope, right?
Well, that was what Constantine was doing, the same thing. He put the government in charge of religion, and so we're gonna have one religion. And what are we trying to do 2,000 years later? One world religion.
Yeah, no,
Well,
it's
just how do you engage meaningfully in politics is like a confessional Lutheran today, because there's so many different Christians within politics.
Right.
It's just,
yeah. Well, first of all, you realize I have a job as a citizen.
yeah, first, yeah.
To do what I'm supposed to do as a citizen, but I can't see.
Well, it's the two kingdoms.
Yeah, it's the two kingdoms, both ruled by God. You have two kingdoms of God. One is the church, and one is the civil government, and they're both run by God. We somehow think that no, we got to get the church into the civil kingdom to make it a Christian country. No, you do your thing as a citizen. You're going to base what you do on your Christian values, like that, and you hope that rubs off on other people. But you don't grab the sword, because that's what belongs to that civil kingdom. Dennis.
I read in the local paper this morning that 65% of the people in DC, super authority, are Christian. I don't believe it.
I wouldn't believe, I don't care. You can go to the most, holy, what we would consider a holy city in America. That we would, you go down south, the buckle, the belt buckle of, the Bible buckle, what, I don't know what. Bible belt. You can go to the Bible Belt, because everybody says, well, they're just a bunch of hicks. They're all Christians and that. And no, they're not. No, they're the same kind of, maybe like a civil Christian. We have this American Christianity, or even it's turned into an American religion that everybody's happy with. And, but it's not. But in the end, let's get back to this. But in the end, that's what Alexander wanted to do. That's what Antiochus Epiphanes wanted, to do. Then it's a matter of how you carry it out. Now, Antiochus, he was Antiochus IV. He took on the title Epiphanes. And Epiphanes means God manifest. He declared himself that he was the manifestation, the incarnation of God himself, except for the god was Zeus. So he was Zeus incarnate, but he was the one to be worshiped. So when you get to Israel and you show up and they got this temple, where are you going to go? If you're God manifest, you're Zeus himself, where are you going to go? You're going to go to the temple, and you're going to make the temple be like you would want a temple to be, not the way that the temple people want it to be. So he must have studied a little bit. He probably got on Google and said, what do these Jews believe? Because I'm going to go against it. Okay. And so the biggest thing that he did was he killed a pig on the altar. Pigs are unclean.
So he did the most disrespectful
He
thing.
did the most disrespectful thing. He declared himself God from the altar. He killed a pig in the altar. Probably did all kinds of other things. But the thing is that then he would send out emissaries to the surrounding towns, and he'd get the people there to convince people to sacrifice pigs in their holy, whatever their local holy, thing was. I don't know if they had synagogues then or whatever, but I'm sure that everybody didn't just show up into Jerusalem and stuff like that. And so, and here, this goes back to when Nicholas was saying, how we'd react, is that they give in, just like I said, if Alexander the Great showed up, he's in Desert Hills, he's coming here, like that. You just give in. And that's what the people started doing. All the people started doing it until he ran into this one guy, Mattathias Maccabees, who had 5 sons, and one of them was Judas Maccabees, who'll turn out to be the hero of the story. But he said, no, we're not going to do this. It's kind of like the statement out of Joshua in chapter 1. It's one of those chapters where he says, as for me and my family, we will serve God, like that. And a lot of people take that as that's a statement, that's, him becoming a Jew. And it's not. It's what a Jew should do is to stand up. No, there's a line, and we're not going to cross that line. We're not going to let anybody cross that line, and we will serve the God. And that's what this Mattathias Maccabees did. I was reading a story where him and his best friend were going to stand up to, Antiochus's people, and his friend chickened out because they were the 2 leaders, and they said, you have to go and sacrifice the pig. And they were supposed to stand up and say no. And Maccabee did, and his friend caved in. And when he went to go do it, Mattathias killed him before he could do it. You know, I mean, his best friend.
That's a very cinematic type of movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, see, and that's the thing. That's where you find out when people start telling the story, whether it's in writing books or making movies, you go, hey, we could really jack that up to make it. Yeah. I was at Safeway yesterday. I had to get a prescription for my wife. And I was standing there in the magazine section, you know, just looking to see if there's any good sports magazines out, which there's no good magazines anymore, you know, because everything's online. But anyway, they had a little thing about a little pamphlet kind of magazine about the chosen, you know, and it said something like the story of Christ or the story of the gospel as it's never been told before. Now, they probably told the story the way it's been told thousands of times, but that's the way you draw people in because what do people want? You know? Yeah, want something new. You know, so this guy's gonna tell us the gospel the way it's never been told before. You know, so what's that? Well, like I say, I'm sure I bet inside if you bought it and you read it, it's the same old story. You know, I mean, maybe not, I don't know, but it's probably, you know, the same old, the same old story. What else are you gonna make new? You know, well, I guess you could. That's where cults come from. You know, they go, let's do something, let's do something new. Right.
I was watching that, Alexander the Great, making of a god on Netflix.
Uh-huh.
And, the beginning part of it, it shows him kissing a guy. And I told my wife, this is well phased. And she said, no, they did that. I said, no, that's not what they taught me in school.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
You know what? And that's the hard thing. That's the hard thing is how do you know what's true? I mean,
I think they've always been human, like we're no different than
oh,
that breed.
definitely.
Yeah, and I think that's what we forget, like the
Yeah.
distance of time makes it seem mythical, like
Yeah.
different people when they tell the same.
No,
thoughts,
the exact same. Like I've told you, we're just as, people were just as wicked as we are today. The only thing is our technology is better. We can kill a lot more people with the push of a button where they had to go get boiling vats of hot oil to throw over the castle wall or a catapult to throw boulders at, those things actually land on people. A boulder. I mean, don't you go,
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway. So so the five sons, Mattathias, he tells his five sons, we have to stand up against this. They agreed. They got some other people. I read somewhere that goes in the beginning, it was only like maybe 10% of the people that would rise up and fight him. And then more people came along as the battle went on. But you got to remember, and this is probably like the American Revolution and the British. The British are walking in their red coats in formation, and the Swamp Fox, I don't know who else was there, George Washington, stuff like that. They've got regular clothes on. They're hiding in the bushes. They're fighting more of a guerrilla war. And apparently that's what happened here. And they defeated this big army. I gotta remember, it probably wasn't the whole Greek army or stuff like that, because they figure we're going to go down here. How much resistance can they put up?
But every culture almost has a similar story. Like I could think of
the surviving cultures, the ones that got defeated.
A very similar story, like how you're saying that, like it was a leader in the town.
Right.
Tells a person like there's Japanese stories like that. Where it's like a samurai.
The British had all those Indian crosses on the front of them.
The what? I missed it. Anyway, so now you have to picture, we'll wrap this up. You have to picture. So now the bad guys are gone, retreated, laying dead in the street. I don't know. But the bad guys are gone, and we go, yay, we won. And now they look at the temple and they go, now what do we do? We can't use the temple, it's defiled, you know? So they had to figure out one, how to clean it, cleanse it.
So then that's a question I have.
Yeah,
What
use
if-
your microphone, get closer to your microphone, because I got Chris online. I want to make
What
sure.
if they decide to use the temple?
Pardon?
What if they decided to use the temple? Like, what would the consequences?
It would have been unclean and God wouldn't have accepted their worship, because there is a way to do it. Yeah, there's a biblical way to do it, and nothing has changed. So if you read the last half of Exodus and you read the book of Leviticus, because Leviticus talks about all the sacrifices, the end of Exodus talked about how to build and decorate the temple, the tabernacle at that time, the tabernacle and what it all meant. Leviticus talked about how to do the sacrifice, how to do the ceremonies, how the priests were to dress. I mean, just everything was. And then what happened to, was it Aaron's sons who did the strange fire? See, they're like the high priests in training. Dad's the high priest.
Strange fire and sacrifice.
Yeah, and whatever the strange fire is, we don't know, but it wasn't the proper fire. They didn't do it right, and God took them out. Like that. And I think that's probably, I don't know if God would have taken them out, like
He
that.
wouldn't have allowed it to occur.
He probably wouldn't have allowed it to occur. Well, now we can go to I was going to say to modern days. We'll go up to 70 AD anyway. So Jesus has been crucified as the lamb who was led to slaughter for the sins of the world, which renders the whole sacrificial system null and void. Okay? Makes the temple null and void because God doesn't live there anymore. Where does God live? With his followers, in our hearts. We are the temple of God. So the sacrificial system's gone, null and void. The temples, null and void. And the usefulness of priests is null and void because there's no temple, there's no sacrifices. But the people kept doing it. See, now it's unclean, even though it may be the same temple, even though they may be doing the exact same rituals, it's now unclean. And so God said, enough of this. We're going to destroy the temple. He calls in the Romans, and Emperor Titus or General Titus, whoever he is, and they wipe out, the Jews that are there and destroys the temple and sacks Jerusalem, all because, not because they weren't good people, not because they weren't nice people, but because they weren't doing it right. I mean, that's the only way I can think of saying it. They weren't doing it right. And so he took out all of their stuff. Yeah. So anyway, so they go in, they figure out how to cleanse the temple, and you got to remember, cleansing, cleanness and uncleanness is more, it's more about the way things are done. It's a more spiritual thing. It's not a matter of, we have to cleanse it. Let's get out the Baba or the comet or, yeah, and it wasn't for that. It was to make it holy again, whatever they had to do. And again, you would have to go back into the Old Testament to find out what it was that you had to do. If you remember, I don't know if you remember, when they came out of Babylon and 10% of the people returned from Babylon, the others liked it there. You know what? It's pretty cool here in Babylon. We got families, we got jobs, we got kids. They're in school. We don't want to take them out of school and move them and stuff like that. So really only about 10% of the people that were in captivity went back to Jerusalem, and they had to rebuild the temple. And this is the story of Nehemiah and Ezra, and they're lacking something until one of the king guys comes up, Josiah. I don't know if it was Josiah or who. Somebody finds in the temple a Bible. you know, that nobody had used for forever. And he says, Sergeant, wow, look at it. This tells us what we're supposed to do. And he publicly read to the people, you know, of what they were supposed to do to get the temple. You know, that temple wasn't torn to the ground. It was just in disarray, you know, like that. But what they had to do to get it all right. I got a feeling, even though I'd have to read the book of Maccabees.
Well, I have another question.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you read a lot of like.
Do your microphone.
When you read some of the different like Reformation authors, like, you know, like they'll be like exhorting each other, whatever, Martin Luther, I don't want to get into it, you know, different.
Yeah.
They'll use biblical verses almost to like compare themselves to prophets.
To compare themselves.
Not compare themselves, but kind of like to,
Oh,
like to
right,
really just
yeah.
like drive home a point, not compare.
I do too.
No, but I'm saying,
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
so it seemed like they drew it a lot closer to themselves, like they felt like the work they were doing at that time, the things they were doing were like directly in line with history.
We all, you know what, and we all do that. We all do that. We all
No,
think
no, it's-
the reason that we're gathered at Lamb of God Lutheran Church is because we don't think those Baptists do it right. They may be Christians, but you know, they're just not doing it right. You know, those Calvary Chapel people, you know, they're a little bit, you know. So no, I'm saying we do that. I mean, that's to our shame. You know, that's our shame that we think we're right. Well, if we didn't think we were right, we'd be in the other church. We're not, so.
No, and I'm not saying that can also come from like a place. I don't think that necessarily has to come from a place of like spitefulness.
Yeah.
Like people can genuinely feel like, I feel like the Baptists have brought like without hatred or animosity toward each other, like you can feel genuinely that you're correct.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Feel strong in that conviction, but also respect the other person.
Okay, wait, hang on just a second. Let me, because I don't want to, let's see. Anyway, let me just say this. They purified the temple, they cleansed it, they consecrated it, they reinstalled the work, and they began to worship God again. Okay? And then that's what takes us up. Hang on just a second. That's what takes us up to this miracle of the lights, which we've touched on. We'll get to that. We'll get to that next week, because again, that gets into even with the modern day, the way they celebrate Hanukkah. And that's what I want to do next time. But pretty much that's the story of Hanukkah in a nutshell. Go ahead.
That's the story that I told you about in Master's Men, about the prophetess Huldah.
Hold on.
Huldah, because the chief priest, after they found the book of the law, and when they were trying to restore Solomon's temple, that they told Josiah. all
Yeah,
about
Josiah,
it.
that's what I
And
said.
Josiah.
Yeah, he
found
read
the
it.
book and cleansed the temple and got rid of all the idols and all and idolatry that was
Right.
going on, and got their act together.
Yeah. You know, that goes back to, so we think that it's hard because nobody wants to confront people. But even then, when they came back from Babylon, the people that came back, and then they found out there's a right way to do it, a Jewish right way, you know, because we can all say, yeah, there's a right way. But I mean, if we're going to stick close to the way that our, well, we can even say our religion does, you want to know the right way to do it. But even through that, then they were told, you got to get rid of the strange woman you brought back with you. And that's, I don't know, maybe for some guys that was harder than others, but no, but I mean, just that.
That's always been a tension. I think you can see the church throughout history is inner renewal and mission.
Yeah.
Like you're trying to spread your message.
Yeah.
But you're also trying to maintain like a catechized,
Yeah.
strong following.
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
Well, it's, you know, it's the way, you know, Lutherans have big presence in Africa, you know, and so you teach them Lutheran stuff and try to work it into their culture where the culture part doesn't matter. I mean, do they have to sing German hymns? in Africa. Well, a lot of people think, think that, yeah. Yeah,
Like truly the vastness of it, like there's it's touched in every branch.
Right.
Of like, there's been Supreme Court justices who are Lutheran, there's been, I think there's
Yeah.
been a neglecting of Lutheran history.
yeah, no, yeah, like I say, well, in the stuff that's in the left-hand kingdom, you can be involved in, like that. It's a matter of what goes on in church. Anyway, that's it in a nutshell. We'll get back to, next week, we'll start out with, so why did they ask Jesus? Why'd they confront him like that at Hanukkah? Okay, and that is a big thing. I've got a reason here. There is a reason that they were doing this at Hanukkah, because they wanted to know, well, I'll give you a preview. They wanted to know, is he kind of the return of Judas Maccabees? Judas Maccabees means the hammer. If you see some paintings of him, he's got the big hammer in his head. He's like the hammer of God. And so that's what they're trying to figure out. They say, if you're the Messiah, let us know. If you're the Christ, let us know, because they're kind of expecting maybe this guy is, Judas Maccabees, because they're celebrating, that historical event.
That's
So,
what they asked John the Baptist, same thing. Are you the one?
yeah, no, so they were always looking, but they rejected everybody that they were looking at. That's the thing, and that's a hard, we would do the same. I think I've asked this before. What would it take if somebody showed up, we're in the middle of our church service, pastor's up there and he's just getting there to, preach the sermon, and somebody's sitting in the front row, robe, long hair, sandals, and he says, can I have a word? Pastor, being a nice guy, says, yeah, give you 5 minutes. And he preaches a Jesus message. How long is it going to take us to throw him out?
Tomatoes,
Huh?
tomatoes.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. What would it take for us to believe somebody today? That's the same thing that those people had to confront. They had 1,500 years of learning the law and being told they had to follow the law. And here comes along this guy who says pretty much, I'm the fulfillment of that. Because the guy who gave the law, he used to open the earth and suck people down and, like that. So, okay. Huh? Yeah. Okay. Any last things? Otherwise, we'll close with Lord's Prayer here. Let me stop recording. Did I stop?